You have a toothbrush in your bathroom right now. Toothpaste. Maybe floss you feel guilty about not using enough. Your ancestors had none of this. No bristles. No mint paste. No dentist waiting twice a year with a metal pick. And yet, for most of human history, their teeth were healthier than yours. That should not make sense. How does a species with zero dental hygiene end up with fewer cavities than a species obsessed with it? The answer isn't about willpower or ancient wisdom. It's about what was actually going into their mouths, and it forces you to rethink what healthy teeth really depends on. Start with the evidence, because it's stranger than you'd expect. Anthropologist Clark Spencer Larson has spent decades examining skeletal remains from populations before and after the shift to farming, and his research on ancient teeth shows something remarkable. Hunter-gatherer skeletons, going back tens of thousands of years, show shockingly low rates of dental cavities, often under 2% of teeth affected. Compare that to populations after the agricultural revolution, roughly 12,000 years ago, where cavity rates jumped dramatically, in some farming populations affecting a third or more of all teeth. Same species. Same jaw. Same lack of toothbrushes. Completely different outcome. So what changed? Diet. Almost entirely diet. Here's the plain English version of what's actually happening in your mouth right now. Your teeth are covered in a thin, sticky film called plaque, a living community of bacteria that forms constantly, whether you brush or not. Some of those bacteria, especially a species called Streptococcus mutans, feed on sugars and refined starches. When they eat sugar, they produce acid as a waste product, and that acid slowly dissolves the mineral structure of your enamel. That's a cavity. It is not a mystery disease. It is bacteria digesting sugar and leaving acid behind, over and over, until your tooth gives way. Now picture what a hunter-gatherer was actually eating. Anthropologist Peter Unger, who has spent his career studying the wear patterns on ancient teeth under microscopes, has shown that pre-agricultural diets were built around wild game, fibrous vegetables, nuts, and fruit in its natural, unprocessed form. No flour. No refined sugar. No sticky starches sitting on the tooth surface for hours. The food was tough to chew, low in fermentable carbohydrates, and it moved through the mouth without leaving much behind for bacteria to feast on. Your ancestors weren't cleaning their teeth. They simply weren't feeding the bacteria that destroy them. There's a second piece to this story, and it comes from an unlikely source, the plaque itself. Biomolecular archaeologist Christina Wariner pioneered a method of extracting ancient DNA directly from fossilized dental plaque, called dental calculus, preserved on skeletons thousands of years old. That hardened plaque acts almost like a time capsule, trapping bits of food, bacteria, and even inhaled particles from the exact moment a person lived. Wariner's research revealed that the oral microbiome, the community of bacteria living in the mouth, shifted dramatically as human diets changed. Pre-agricultural populations carried a more diverse, more balanced bacterial community. Once farming introduced starchy staples like wheat and barley in massive quantities, the microbiome shifted toward species that thrive on sugar and produce more acid. The mouths themselves changed, chemically and biologically, in response to what people started eating. So let's reconstruct what a single day of eating actually looked like for someone 20,000 years ago, and why their mouth barely stood a chance against cavities even without a toothbrush. Morning might start with foraged greens, tough and fibrous, requiring real chewing that scraped along the tooth surface and stimulated saliva flow, saliva being your mouth's own natural rinse, packed with minerals that help repair microscopic damage to enamel. Midday might bring roasted meat, protein, and fat with essentially nothing for cavity-causing bacteria to metabolize. An afternoon snack might be wild berries or root vegetables, still sugar, but in small amounts, bound up in fiber, and gone from the mouth quickly rather than lingering in a sticky residue. There was no flour-based bread coating the molars for hours. No dried fruit stuck between teeth from breakfast until dinner. No sugary drink sipped slowly across an entire afternoon. The food simply didn't give the bacteria the fuel or the time they needed. Now here's the counterintuitive twist, the part that flips the whole story on its head. You'd assume agriculture, humanity's great leap forward, made life better in every measurable way. In many ways, it did. But when it comes to teeth, agriculture was closer to a trap. Farming brought reliable calories, yes, but it also brought carbohydrate-dense staple crops, wheat, barley, rice, corn, foods that break down into simple sugars the moment they hit saliva. Larson's skeletal data shows the shift happening again and again across unrelated agricultural societies on different continents. As soon as a population became dependent on starchy grains, cavity rates climbed. The very innovation that let human populations explode in size was quietly wrecking their teeth in the process. Progress and decay arrived in the same package. There's an even sharper version of this pattern hiding in more recent history. Look at populations that shifted to sugar-heavy diets during and after European colonization and industrialization. The archaeological and dental record shows cavity rates climbing even further, tracking almost perfectly with the availability of refined sugar. The more processed and sugar-dense the diet became, the worse the teeth got, regardless of era, regardless of culture, regardless of whether people were brushing. This is where it should hit you, because you already know exactly how this story ends, with you, right now. Your ancestors didn't need a toothbrush because their environment never handed their mouth bacteria a steady supply of fuel. You do need a toothbrush, floss, and regular dental visits, not because your biology got worse, but because your environment changed. You live surrounded by refined sugar, fast-digesting carbohydrates, and constant snacking, foods engineered to be soft, sweet, and available at every hour. Your teeth are running the exact same genetic hardware your hunter-gatherer ancestors had. The software, what you're actually feeding it, is almost unrecognizable. That reframes dental hygiene itself. Brushing and flossing aren't ancient wisdom you've lost. They're modern compensation, a technological patch for a modern problem your ancestors simply didn't have. You're not failing to live up to some old standard. You're managing a mouth that evolved for a very different diet than the one it's actually getting. Think about what that means the next time you reach for something sticky and sweet, letting it sit in your mouth between meals. You're not just making a choice about taste. You're deciding how much fuel to hand over to the exact same bacteria your ancestors starved out simply by eating food that looked nothing like yours. It's not about how hard you scrub. It's about how much sugar and refined starch is sitting on your teeth in the first place, and for how long. There's something oddly reassuring in this, if you let it land. Your body isn't broken. Your teeth aren't weaker than your ancestors' teeth. The DNA is nearly identical. What's different is entirely external, and that means it's also, at least partly, within your control. You can't go back to eating like a Paleolithic forager, and you probably wouldn't want to. But you can understand, with real clarity now, why a species that never owned a toothbrush still managed, for 250,000 years, to keep its teeth. You have a toothbrush in your bathroom right now. Toothpaste. Maybe floss you feel guilty about not using enough. Your ancestors never needed any of it, not because they were tougher, or wiser, or better adapted than you. They simply never had the chance to feed the bacteria that are, right now, quietly waiting on your teeth for their next meal.